The IMF has recently upped the growth forecast for India for this financial year from 6.8 to 7%. You seem to be more bullish at this moment than the Ministry of Finance itself. I want to understand, what is it that you're seeing in the Indian economic story at this moment which has led you to increase the growth projection for this year?
Rahul, so firstly, India's growth did much better than we expected the last fiscal year, and those carryover effects are affecting our forecast for this year. The other factor is we see private consumption recovering. Last year, if you looked at private consumption growth, it was around 4%. We expect that to increase, driven by the recovery in rural consumption. We're already seeing that if you look at two-wheeler sales, and if you look at the so-called fast-moving consumer goods sales, you're seeing that coming back up. The better monsoons that have happened, we expect will generate better harvests, and because of that, with agricultural incomes going up, we should see a recovery in rural consumption. So those are the two factors behind our upgrade.
And do you see this recovery in consumption, because that's really been one of the biggest topics of conversation here, that consumption, especially in rural areas, hasn't been growing. Do you see this as being sustainable or just a short-term blip in recovery?
Yeah. So last year, an important headwind was the weaker monsoons, the weaker crop output, and that hitting rural incomes, which was one of the factors that affected consumption in the rural areas. So we see that changing for this year. Now, that said, of course, there is the need for more general structural reforms in the economy to bring about higher growth. We have medium-term growth for India at around 6.5%. Now, at these numbers, India will remain one of the fastest growing, the fastest growing G20 economy in terms of major economies of the world. For example, 7% growth rate for this year would contribute about 17% to global growth. So India is a bright spot in the global economy in terms of its growth rates. But in terms of bringing up overall private consumption and so on, we think some of these factors will play a role. But more generally, structural reforms, which the Prime Minister put a lot of focus on in his Independence Day speech, is going to play.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.